I mean, this is just a prime example of the dysfunction that exists when it comes to U.S. policy in the Persian Gulf region and in the Middle East altogether. It also shows the chaos and confusion that exists in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, about what their role is and what's expected of them. The Saudis are very concerned about being overtaken by Iran as a regional superpower. But the fact is, Iran is a regional superpower and Saudi Arabia is not. Saudi Arabia wouldn't be doing any of the things it's doing in Yemen or in Iraq if it weren't for American backing. Iran acts independently. And American backing is no guarantee of success, as we've seen. What we have here is, an example of Saudi Arabia trying to achieve strategic goals and objectives in Yemen by sustaining a blockade of Ansarallah, the Houthi, and encouraging violent action against Ansarallah by Saudi proxies in Yemen. When people speak of the axis of resistance, they need to understand that it's real. It's not imaginary. It's not fictitious. That means that there are organizations and nations that have commonality of purpose when it comes to security. And so when the Ansarallah or the Houthi are attacked and threatened by Saudi Arabia, there are allies who will respond in kind. And this is what's happened. I don't know if the PMF was involved in the strikes. I would doubt that they were because, as you said, they're part of the Iraqi army. But there are numerous militias that are outside of the framework of direct Iraqi government control who have the capacity to launch attacks against Saudi Arabia, and I believe did launch attacks against Saudi Arabian oil facilities. But what does Saudi Arabia expect? I mean, you don't get to exist in a vacuum. You don't get to go around and do something here and expect nothing to happen there. So they've basically uncorked a genie of violence, and they're not going to be able to put that genie back in the bottle. This ends badly for Saudi Arabia. This ends very badly for Saudi Arabia because all they did is kill. I think they killed 8 Iraqi PMF members and 5 Iranian IRGC advisors. That's not a fatal blow. I mean, it's tragic for the families involved, but the notion that this somehow, blunted what was going on. First of all, they hit the wrong target. That's the other thing. The intelligence of the United States is not creative in this fashion, and we hit the wrong target. We didn't hit the targets responsible for the strikes. And the other thing is, all we did is alienate Iraq against us. So we didn't get the approval of the Iraqi government. A phone call was made to the Iraqi prime minister in which these issues were discussed. And then that was taken as concurrence. And then we struck. This just undermines an Iraqi prime minister whose hold on power is already tenuous. Recall that, he didn't win the last parliamentary election. He's appointed by the United States. There was a different outcome, but we wouldn't allow that outcome because we deemed to be more sympathetic to Iran than what we wanted. So we've already manipulated the domestic political affairs of Iraq. We've been doing so ever since we invaded and overthrew Saddam Hussein. And now we've done this. Who knows what this will trigger? I mean, this could very well trigger a military uprising against the prime minister and his ouster from power. I mean, because as you said, the PMF is part of the Iraqi military. And the National Security Council saying, we didn't approve this. The prime minister is saying, I didn't. But the point is, why did the United States feel comfortable making a phone call to the prime minister to begin with? Because they think he is their paid boy. And that reality is he is their paid boy. There would have been a response that the Iraqi prime minister could have given, a nationalized televised conference saying, I've received a phone call from the United States and I'm going to give my response in public. No, hell no. Don't even think about it. Instead, he hemmed and hawed, remained in silence, took everybody by surprise, and the United States carried out this attack. The man's a moral and intellectual coward. He's a political failure. And hopefully his days are numbered because he's not good for Iraq. Saudi Arabia, all they did is guarantee that their already exposed oil fields will be struck again. And another thing that people have to keep in mind is Iran's not out of the picture. There is no ceasefire. Let's stop pretending. If there was a ceasefire, then Iran wouldn't have launched missiles against Jordan. Iran will do what Iran needs to do. The IRGC has already said there is no ceasefire, and as needed, we will do what is required. And now that Saudi Arabia is attacked, a neighboring nation, Iraq, Iran may very well come to their assistance. If the non-aligned pro-Iranian militias now engage directly Saudi Arabia in open conflict, Iran could very well side with them. And then Saudi Arabia disappears as a modern nation state. The perfumed, fat, obese princes that currently occupy the senior positions of the Saudi leadership will, find themselves with no oil-based income, and maybe then the Bedouins will grow a pair of testicles and rise up and behead them. Something, but the Saudi leadership is not good for Saudi Arabia. They care only about themselves. People need to, delve into the lifestyle of these people. Go to Bahrain, for instance, and it's tough right now because it's getting shelled. But back before it was shelled, just take a look at what's happening in Bahrain. What was the nightlife like? Who's driving the nightlife? It's all the pious Saudis and their royalty running there. The royalty flies to London. Go on that airplane. Watch how when they cross the Saudi national boundaries, they strip out of their clothes, start dressing in the most wild Western clothes. They land in London, and the debauchery that takes place in London is beyond belief. What the men do there is recorded by British intelligence, and what the women do is recorded by British intelligence, and they're all co-opted, and they go back, and now they have files that they can never talk about because what they do is unspeakable. And they go back and they put their clothes on, they pretend they're pious. When you get off the causeway connecting Bahrain to Saudi Arabia, you'll see mosque after mosque after mosque after mosque. Why? Because the sinful Saudis, as they come through, believe that by building a mosque or funding a mosque, they've somehow absolved themselves of the sin until the next time they go to Bahrain. This is who is governing Saudi Arabia today. They only care about their narcissistic well-being. They don't care about the Saudi people. They don't care about the region. And their narcissism can only be funded by the continued production of oil. And so this is all about how they keep the oil flowing, and they've bought into the false premise that the United States is a guarantor of continued Saudi oil production capacity. It's not. I'm not here to encourage global economic catastrophe, but right now Saudi Arabia could be literally wiped from the planet. All Nasrallah has to do is press forward its attacks and destroy the totality of Saudi Arabia's oil production infrastructure. All the Iranian militias have to do in the pro-Iranian militias in Iraq is press forward the attack and destroy the totality of Saudi Arabia's oil production capacity within range. And then Iran just comes and cleanups the mess. The eastern Saudi oil fields exist in an area where there's a prominent or dominant Shia population. Maybe it's time for the Shia to rise up, march on Riyadh, take care of the business. I mean, this Saudi regime has to go. It has to go. It's bad for Saudi Arabia. It's bad for the regime. And by participating in this blatant attack against Iraq, they set themselves up for failure.
Do you think, Scott, when it comes to the response from Iraq, I assume that Yemen would do something about it? Because if we assume that these drones came from Iraq, how do you see the combination of the two, drones from Iraq and missiles from Yemen? And what do we know about the air defense systems in Saudi Arabia?
What do we know about the air defense systems in Saudi Arabia? Yeah. I don't know. Aren't there a couple Saudi oil fields that are burning? Now we know about the Saudi air defense systems. They don't work. That's it. And so, as I said, Saudi Arabia is laid naked right now.
When you go that far, you have to understand the repercussions of what you're doing. It doesn't seem, I don't know what are they thinking of with these attacks.
When you look, the reality of the Gulf Arab region is starting to be exposed. We tend to believe that these are rational thinking human beings because they put on a facade of civility, a facade of civilization paid for by the oil that they produce, the oil that the West buys. And so they'll go out and they'll build a Louvre lookalike. That happened in Abu Dhabi. Go to the Louvre. Don't have to go to Paris. Just come right here to Abu Dhabi, and you can have the same culture that you have in Paris. Go to Dubai, and you've got the great towers, and you got the party life, and you got all that. So it's just like the West. It's just like the West, except it's ruled by the most perverted, corrupted class of human beings in mankind. Gulf Arab princes. These aren't good people. These are simply people who were in the right place at the right time when the British Empire collapsed and Great Britain anointed them to be the neo-colonial masters of the Gulf responsive to England. I was in Abu Dhabi. I met the British advisor of the Crown Prince, and he is an MI6 operative. I just gave away one of the best secrets everybody knows about. Next to every Saudi prince, next to every Gulf Arab prince, next to every sheikh is a CIA or MI6 controller that controls everything they do and monitors everything they do. I was trying to have a conversation with him about Iran's nuclear program and how at that time Abu Dhabi was talking about a peaceful nuclear program. And I had an idea about how maybe they could do a uranium enrichment consortium to absorb the Iranian enrichment with Abu Dhabi and therefore legitimize enrichment, control enrichment. We wouldn't have the problem we have today. And he was interested until the British MI6 operative interceded. And so that's a conversation we're not having right now. It's not a sovereign state, is it? This is the reality. You're expecting rational behavior from Saudi Arabia. There is no rational behavior from Saudi Arabia. It is a corrupt regime. Everything about it is corrupt from the top to the bottom because there's just so much money pouring in there. And so they disguise their ineptitude. They disguise their corruption. They disguise their depravity by wrapping themselves in comfort, by wrapping themselves in riches. But once you peer through that, you lift it up and you look into it, it is ugly. It is grotesque. And what you're seeing right now is the foreign policy manifestation of this ugliness and grotesqueness. They don't know what they're doing. They are panicked right now, in an absolute state of panic. And in their panic, they're turning to the United States for their salvation. And that's going to be one of the fatal mistakes of the Saudi monarchy.
Yeah. You've mentioned the Iranian attack on Jordan last night, and at the same time, they were attacking some targets in Iraqi Kurdistan as well. And what do we know? This is the first time Iran is attacking Jordan without being attacked. This is something.
No, we need to correct that record, Nima, because that implies that somehow the United States didn't launch a surprise attack against Iran back on February 28th. All right. That implies that the United States didn't unilaterally violate the memorandum of understanding and the ceasefire and initiate armed aggression against Iran. You see, there's no ceasefire. Iran's never agreed to a ceasefire. So it's continuity of action. Iran didn't attack the United States void of cause. The war continues from the Iranian perspective. They didn't say quit. They didn't start it, and it ain't over yet. So let's not pretend that somehow Iran launched a surprise attack. Iran didn't launch a surprise attack. Iran continues to defend its interests. And what it did is detect activity at a Jordanian airbase about airstrikes that were getting already launched against PMF forces. And so they launched a preemptive strike, not a surprise attack, but a continuity of violence that was initiated solely by the United States. That's what happened. It's not a surprise attack. It's not perfidy. It's not Iran playing games. Iran is at war against the United States. And you have to keep that in mind when you talk about what Iran's potential future options will be, because there is no ceasefire. Iran can hit anything it's already hit anytime it wants to hit with full knowledge that it's doing the right thing.
Yeah. What is the reason that Donald Trump has decided to put out some sort of pause with Iran? And are they preparing for a new round of war? Or what is that?
I don't know. How do you prepare for a new round of war when you have nothing? Why did they stop the last time? Ran out of oil, ran out of ammunition. They got enough oil and they thought they had enough ammunition, so they started it over again. Now they run out of ammunition, they're running out of oil. So they stop. That's it. Probably means that they're probably going to build up to try and do a third round. Because you can't trust the United States. It's agreement incapable. The United States lies about everything. They lied about the MOU. They lied straight up about the MOU. The MOU was always a facade to buy time. So what is the reasoning? The Russians have declared, I don't know if it's an official statement from the Kremlin, but it's coming out from that the foreign ministry in coordination with other Russian agencies has determined that Donald Trump is emotionally unstable. Now, we know that. Anybody who monitors his social media postings know that this is not a well man. I declared him to be suffering from extreme narcissistic personality disorder of a antisocial variant. He is malignant in this regard. But he's not a rational actor. He's unpredictable. He can wake up in the morning and anything can happen. Anything can happen. Like, for instance, if you're Saudi Arabia and you've engaged in a 6 to 8 month long negotiation about the potential of American assistance in uranium enrichment, and you have an agreed upon framework ready to be signed, only to have Donald Trump wake up next morning, go to the bathroom and have gas problems or something and decide, no, we will not agree to this unless Saudi Arabia concurs with the Abrams Accords, something Saudi Arabia said they'll never do until that's like me going to Las Vegas and say, watch out. How can you I'm going to bring everything in on this table. Wake up in the morning. I'm going to bring it all in on this next to find out you don't. Then I reach in my wallet, pull out $3. Wake up in the morning, thinking all I got. Understanding based upon weeks of negotiations, only to find out the president had a brain. Whatever. There was a time when we decided that it wasn't the case. Snap of a finger. We did that. Operation the United States. There's another governed by a man who sets policy through social media. Operation Iraqi Freedom. Straight up. Actually, it was Iraqi Liberation. No coordination. You realize that smelled oil and nobody wanted to go to war for oil, so we changed the defense. I'd hate to be anybody in his cabinet because you have no idea what's going to happen in the morning. Nothing. You think you have policy. This isn't bewitched. You don't get to rub your nose and magically forces to put something else out there without the reason why we could deploy 700,000 troops in 1990, 1991 is that we had spent the last 2 decades preparing for a major war in Europe, emotionally unstable. Through reforge or return of forces. That's a polite way of saying Germany, that he is we were ready to deploy 300,000 troops within 10 days. So we had troops on standby, trained, equipped, ready. But we also had a large standing army, 250,000 in Germany with the equipment ready to go to war. So when the time came to divert them, we were able to pull forces out of Germany that were combat ready. We had the lift capacity to do so, and we brought them in, and then we could bring in other forces, marry them up with equipment, because we paid the money and we trained to do this. We were prepared to do this. By 2003, we didn't have that capacity anymore. We had a more limited, reduced capacity, but we're still able to generate 200,000 security of Saudi Arabia. The answer is no. Reduced. It's an economic capacity. We're still operating in a benign environment. It's a recognition we landed in a Kuwait port where there's no enemy forces attacking us. We built up forces. If he came out and said that's what we're doing, enemy capability to oppose us, landing on airfields without any intervention. Now we have zero capacity deployed. It takes 5 months for a U.S. Army heavy brigade in Fort Carson, Colorado, for Saudi Arabia for a peacetime deployment to Poland. 5 months to get their act together, to go through the training, to do the manpower things, to get people in, because it's a peacetime military. I mean, what's going on between Netanyahu and units reduced Trump? I mean, they're both. You got to build them back up. You got to get them trained. That's okay because they're masters. And remember, we don't have units that are permanently combat ready anymore. Larger cabal. We don't. The Grand Zionist project. We have to send them to the NTC, National Training Center. Netanyahu's not the driver. Netanyahu's about ready to lose an election, and we deploy them to Poland. And when we lose that election, there's a good chance he's going to go to jail for the rest of his life. Maybe his political allies will say that. That's just one brigade. Imagine if Donald Trump trying to send doomed in the midterms unless the Pentagon totally rips up the Constitution, does something back in 2020, in which case they shot down the law-abiding members of the United States drone, and Trump said he's going to bomb Iran, and then the Pentagon said don't do it with the president. Take the Strait of Hormuz, and it's going to take us about 800,000 to 1.2 million men to do that. But we knew what it was back then, and we said we don't have it. It would take us easily 9 months to a year and a half to build up these forces by mobilizing reserves, by training them. They're not winning in Syria. How do we get them there? General Berger, the Commander of the Marine Corps, recognized that we couldn't. He said we're married to a legacy system of amphibious shipping where all the assets go into one ship. Authorization Act currently underway being considered. And the anti-shipping missiles capability of Iran sinks everything. There's a reason why our aircraft carriers are operating far away from Iranian shores. That's because if we get close, we get overwhelmed. We try and bring in amphibious shipping to Chabahar to offload project power inland to seize the Strait of Hormuz, which was the 1985 war plan that I was involved in. So, and again, I wouldn't. The Saudis need to wake up to the fact that do that? This can't is corrupt. So when you say the United States is going to bring everything in, we've got nothing to bring. Israel and the United States. We are literally doesn't view Saudi Arabia as an asset. So the Abrams Accord is a paper tiger, whatever analogy you want to do. There's not a damn thing we can do because the greater Israeli project isn't about making Saudi Arabia prosperous or peaceful. Our air power, it's about Israeli dominance of the region. And we paid the price. Everybody else is a tool.
to
be
sustain
used,
long-term
discarded,
air
tossed away.
combat has been devastated by Iranian
Until Saudi Arabia
counterstrikes.
recognizes
We've run
that
out
they're
of
on a highway
long-range
to
precision
hell.
strike weapons.
And right now they have maybe
We're
gone
running
a
out
bridge
of
too
air
far. I'm using all these
missile
analogies here, but
interceptor
people should
capability.
understand what I'm saying.
There's no
Because
defense
if the
industrial
PMF, if the
magic out there. This isn't a
militias
computer
decide
game where you hit
to
the
go-
cheat code and
go for
click the
broke,
button and suddenly you build up
there's nothing that can
capabilities.
save Saudi
This
Arabia.
is reality.
And also
our
remember
defense
this,
industry
a
is
little
not
story from the
capable of
past.
responding in a timely
In the
fashion.
build up to the Desert
So
Storm,
we've blown the bolt. We got
there's talk,
nothing left to replace it.
there was a period of time
We're
during
going to
Desert
pretend here that
Shield
Donald
when,
Trump's going to be
the Marines
building
were
up
hanging out on
resources
their own
for a
up
third
there. They were
try.
basically speed bumps.
No.
If the Iraqis told the
It's
Republican
over.
Guard to
We
head
lost.
south, there ain't nothing going to
Game,
stop
set,
them. Marines
match.
would have gotten out there, fired
And
off
it's
their
time for the
basic
United
loads,
States to
and then been
recognize
speed
this.
bumps, run
And it's
over by
time for
Iraqi
Saudi
tanks.
Arabia and the Gulf
Fortunately,
Arab
the
nations to
Iraqis
also
didn't
recognize
do
this.
that.
If you
And we were
continue
able
to
to
align
reinforce
with
the
the
United
window of
States.
vulnerability,
Only bad things
we
are
kept
gonna
telling the
happen to
Saudis,
you.
hey, why don't you take some of your
Scott, what
military
do you
off
make
the
of
southern
Zelensky and
front with the Yemenis
Zelensky's
and bring them
attack
up
on
here? The
Iranian
Saudis went, hell no.
cargo vessel?
Why? Well, first of all,
Basically,
half of
from
the
Russia
southern
to
part of
Iran,
Saudi
it
Arabia
was
is stolen
attacked.
from
Later
Yemen.
on, we had
Do
the
the history
communication,
research.
the talk
Stole it
between
from them.
Iranian
They stole from the
foreign
Houthi.
minister
And,
and Ukrainians,
Houthi wanted
because
back.
Ukrainians called
And so
Iranians to talk.
there's a good
with
chance
differences
that
aside.
if
But
all
in my
this goes
opinion,
down,
Zelensky
Saudi Arabia is
is
going to be
trying to do
dismembered.
something. I don't know what
Straight up
is his
dismembered.
main
Because it's a
objective
fake
of
country.
with
Everybody
these
knows
attacks.
that. It's a fake country.
First of all,
it doesn't.
the attack was
it's just
next.
carved out of the desert. You know,
Okay, it was
because some
a
Wahhabi head choppers
unfortunate
went in and chopped
consequence
off
of
the leg heads in the
Zelensky's
British
25
June
June
declaration
There it
of
is.
a 40-day drone-based
And when you get rid of the Wahhabist
war of influence
head
against
choppers,
Russia, expanding
you've
the
got
scope
nothing.
and scale of
Now,
Ukrainian
Galileo
attacks
of
to
a
bring
Bedouin
pain to
tribe
Russia.
that hate
And
each other.
so a decision
And
was
it will
made to
break
expand
up
the
the
attacks.
Yemen
in
will
the
take its
Caspian
part.
Sea.
Who knows what
And so
Iraq will do?
Ukrainian
Who knows what,
drones start flying over the Caspian
countries,
Sea,
it doesn't matter.
and they see a
But
ship, and they
the
strike the
point
ship.
is, that whole region is
They didn't
fake.
know it was an Iranian ship.
That whole
They
region
just hit
was
it because
created
that's the business
when
they're in.
specific
leaders
random
random
acts of
themselves to the
violence
political
is
will of
all
their
the
British and
Ukrainian
American
masters.
drone campaign is. And
So
now
they
that
hit
their
the
British
ship.
and American
When
masters
it turned out it was an
floundering
Iranian
in a
new
ship,
master,
Zelensky, who's back at home,
had
having
the power,
declared this
Iran,
40-day war,
they
but
don't know what
losing
to
the
do.
war. They're in
Losing
an absolute
everything,
state of
no
panic.
air defense, no
Iran
nothing,
is the
desperate.
future. Again, says
Who
I can
am I
turn
talking to?
You're an Iranian.
Turn this
You
into
know
an
this.
advantage.
5,000
So he
years of
now
culture
claims
and history.
responsibility. The
And,
Iranians have supplied the
and if
Russians
these
with
Bedouin
drones.
head choppers that
What do you
currently
think we're going to
populate the
do?
leadership positions in
It
Riyadh
is a
think
common
they are the
cause.
equivalent of
We
that,
want to make
they have
common
another
cause with
thing
America.
coming. And
that's
so
what he
Iran
did.
is the power.
Hyped it
Iran
up
is the future
on his way
and,
to the United
you know,
States. And he got to
these
the White
Gulf Arab
House.
states,
And
I
I
think,
tried
tried
to
to make
understand
that
what that means for them.
And
Because
the United States said,
they're not long for this
Sit
world.
down,
if
shut
they
up. We're not
continue
playing
to
that game.
side with
We're
the
not
United States
expanding
against
our
Iran.
conflict